Dambisa Felicia Moyo to February 1969, is a Zambian-born economist who analyzes the macroeconomy, foreign aid impact, and global affairs. She is the author of Dead Aid, Why Aid is Not Working and How There is a Better Way for Africa, How the West Was Lost, 50 Years of Economic Folly and the Stark Choices That Lie Ahead and Winner Take All, China's Race for Resources and What It Means for the World. Biography, Childhood. Moyo was born in 1969 and raised in Lusaka, Zambia. She was not issued a birth certificate due to Zambian law at the time of her birth. She used this as an illustration of development in a lecture in 2013, saying that in 40 years I've gone from not being recognized as a human being, to standing in front of the illustrious TED crowd today to talk to you about my views. Adulthood. Moyo holds a doctorate in economics from St Antony's College, Oxford University. Her 2002 dissertation is titled Essays on the Determinants of the Components of Savings in Developing Countries. In 1997, she earned a Master of Public Administration from Harvard University unregistered trademark S. Kennedy School of Government. She also earned a Master of Business Administration in Finance and Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from American University in Washington, D.C. Moyo worked for the World Bank as a consultant and at Goldman Sachs where she worked in the debt capital markets and as an economist in the global macroeconomics team. Awards and memberships. In 2013, Moyo was awarded the Hayek Lifetime Achievement Award, named for the Nobel Prize winner and recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Friedrich Hayek. Moyo was also a participant at the Bilderberg Conference and was named by Time magazine as one of the world's 100 most influential people. In 2009 Moyo was also honored by the World Economic Forum as one of its young global leaders. In September 2009 Moyo was featured in Oprah Winfrey's Power list of 20 remarkable visionaries. The Daily Beast selected Moyo as one of 150 extraordinary women who shake the world. Moyo serves on the board of Barclays Bank, Submila, and Barrick Gold. She has done numerous speaking engagements at organizations including OECD, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Council on Foreign Relations, American Enterprise Institute and the 2009 Monk debate as well as most of the G7 countries, and has traveled to nearly 60 countries over the last decade. She is a speaker at the 2013 TED Global Conference and spoke at TEDx Brussels in 2009 and 2010. Moyo is a regular contributor to financial journals such as the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal. She is a contributing editor to CNBC and has appeared as a guest on other networks such as CNN, Bloomberg, BBC and Fox Business. She was a patron of Absolute Return for Kids, a hedge fund-supported children unregistered trademark S charity. Bibliography, Winner Take All, Moyo's third book Winner Take All, China's Race for Resources and What It Means for the World was published in June 2012. The book examines the commodity dynamics that the world will face over the next several decades. In particular, the implications of China's rush for resources across all regions of the world. With the scale of China unregistered trademark S resource campaign for hard commodities and soft commodities being one of the largest in history, Moyo presents her research of the financial and geopolitical implications of this in a world of diminishing resources and argues that we are in the middle of unprecedented times. Winner Take All became a New York Times bestseller debuting at number 13 as well as entering the Wall Street Journal's Business Bestsellers at number 4 and the Publisher's Weekly Bestseller list at number 11. A review in the Financial Times states that if Dambisa Moyo is right, the demands of the world are unregistered trademark S most populous state are bad news for the rest of us. One cannot accuse Moyo of failing to do her homework. So much has been packed into it that her book is impossible to read without learning something. Kirkus Reviews states written to clarify important global questions, this book deserves a wide audience. The Telegraph commented perhaps she is right, but the grounds for doubting whether the future will be a straight line from the past deserve a hearing. How the West Was Lost, Moyo unregistered trademark S second book, entitled How the West Was Lost, 50 Years of Economic Folly and the Stark Choices That Lie Ahead, offers an account of the decline of the economic supremacy of the West over the past 50 years. In particular, Moyo examines how America Euro unregistered trademark's flawed decisions and blinkered policies choices around capital, labor and technology are Euro key ingredients for economic growth and success a Euro have resulted in an economic and geopolitical seesaw that is now poised to tip in favor of the emerging world. It became a New York Times bestseller, debuting at number 6 in its first week. It also debuted at number 4 in the Washington Post and number 2 in the Wall Street Journal. The book also had success in Canada, peaking at number 4 and remaining on the bestseller list for 6 weeks. In a review, Paul Collier states that her diagnosis of the recent disasters in financial markets is succinct and sophisticated, and continues I applaud her brave alarm against our economic and social complacency, her core concerns are sufficiently close to painful truths to warrant our attention. Dominic Lawson writes in The Times this argument can rarely have been made more concisely. Moyo is a very serious lady indeed. The Independent says the sad saga of the recession gives legs to Dambisa Moyo Euro unregistered trademark's provocatively entitled book, for it goes to the heart of the great economic issue of our times, how swiftly will power shift over this century. The Guardian says, how the West was lost is more interesting, wider in scale and more important than dead aid. Bloomberg summarizes, the book offers up a well-reasoned look at how the world Euro unregistered trademark's most advanced nations are squandering their economic leader Euro, and how they might survive by fighting Chinese fire with the Euro. The book offers Western politicians a prescription for stopping the rot. Bloomberg named it one of their top business books of 2011. In contrast, Alan Beattie of the Financial Times says the challenges it identifies are for the most part real, if not original. But the huge flaws of the emerging economies are ignored. The Economist says these arguments need much better supporting material than the book provides. Ireland's Sunday Business Post says Moyo Euro unregistered trademark's analysis of the fundamental underpinnings of the credit crunch, especially the role of leveraging, is nuanced and insightful. Dead aid, why aid is not working and how there is another way for Africa argues that foreign aid has harmed Africa and that it should be phased out. It became a New York Times bestseller. It is published in Chinese, English, French, German, Greek, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Polish, Portuguese and Dutch. The book offers proposals for developing countries to finance development, instead of relying on foreign aid. Moyo has stated that her arguments are based on those made by pro-market economists like Peter Bauer and, later, William Easterly. The Financial Times summarized the book's argument, limitless development assistance to African governments, she argues, has fostered dependency, encouraged corruption and ultimately perpetuated poor governance and poverty. She argues that foreign aid helps perpetuate the cycle of poverty and hinders economic growth in Africa. Harvard professor and historian Niall Ferguson wrote the foreword to Dead Aid. Quotes by the chairman and CEO of Forbes, Steve Forbes, appear on the book jacket as well as by former United Nations Secretary-General Mr. Kofi Annan who says Dambisa Moyo makes a compelling case for a new approach to Africa. Moyo's ideas are similar to those held by the Rwandan government and President Paul Kagame. He says that Dead Aid has given us an accurate evaluation of the aid culture today. Kagame also invited Moyo to Rwanda to discuss her thesis and bought copies of the book for his entire cabinet. The former president of Senegal, Abdoulaye Wade has also expressed similar views on aid. The thesis has also been noted by the Chinese Premier Wen Jiabei. Speaking at a China-Africa Cooperation Summit in Egypt, he said I have read a book titled Dead Aid written by Dambisa Moyo. The author talks about her personal experiences and draws the conclusion that China's assistance to Africa is sincere, credible, practical and efficient and is welcomed by the African people. I am confident that time will prove that friendship and cooperation between the Chinese and African people has a bright future. In a book review, economist Paul Collier states that aid is not a very potent instrument for enhancing either security or accountability. Our obsession with it has detracted from the more important ways in which we can promote development, peacekeeping, security guarantees, trade privileges, and governance. The pro-aid organization One disagreed with the book, stating that it calls to cut off all aid. Moyo points out in a number of interviews that this is a misrepresentation of her ideas, and the Financial Times notes that One's campaign at least partially backfired. The economist Jeffrey Sachs has said more foreign aid is needed to improve conditions for Africa, but Moyo points out that when Sachs was her lecturer at Harvard, it was he himself who taught that the path to long-term development would only be achieved through private sector involvement and free market solutions. The Financial Times suggests that the book ignores evidence of development assistance working, but notes that she has energized many fellow Africans to join in the debate. In a 2013 interview, Bill Gates was asked for his views on dead aid's illustration that aid keeps the economy crippled, with the money not being used to make businesses sustainable in Africa. He claimed to have read the book and stated, "Books like that, they're promoting evil." Responding on her website, Moyo stated to cast aside the arguments I raised in Dead Aid at a time when we have witnessed the transformative economic success of countries like China, Brazil and India, belittles my experiences, and those of hundreds of millions of Africans, and others around the world who suffer the consequences of the aid system every day. Publications: Moyo, Dambisa. Winner Take All, China's Race for Resources and What It Means for the World. New York, Basic Books. ISBN A0-465-02828-4. Moyo, Dambisa. How the West Was Lost, 50 Years of Economic Folly Euro, and the Stark Choices That Lie Ahead. New York, Farrar, Straus and Giroux. ISBN A0-374-17325-7. Moyo, Dambisa. Dead Aid, Why Aid Is Not Working and How There Is Another Way for Africa. New York, Farrar, Straus and Giroux. ISBN A0-374-13956-3. Project Syndicatia Commodities on the Rise, Financial Tamiza Hunt for Alpha Leads to Africa, Qualsa Forget the BRICs. Zambia, Estonia and Pakistan are the place for alpha investors. Guernica Magazine Closing the China Gap, The New York Tamiza Beijing, A Boon for Africa, A Permelpika Magazine The China's Veracity is the Better for Africa, New Statis Mana Does Aid Work? Prospector If I Ruled the World, Tamir The Resource Shortage is Real, Financial Tamiza Capitalism for Africa, Change This Manifesto A Call Against Complacency, The New York Tamiza, How to Get America Back on Track, The Tamiza The Country Faces a Dramatic Choice, Sink or Swim, Baronza Holding Housing's Head Above Water, Aberdeen Asset Management America's Hobson's Choice, Financial Times, The Diary, Dambisa Moyo, The Economist, The Lure of Africa, Bond Markets Will Discover Its Attractions, Financial Times, Little Appetite to Question the Aid-Based Status Quo, Foreign Policy, The Next Big Thing, Africa, Wall Street Journal, Why Foreign Aid is Hurting Africa, Financial Times, The Diary, Dambisa Moyo, The Guardian, Capitalism for Africa, References. External links, dambisamoyo.com, Moyo's official website, Facebook fan page, Moyo's official Facebook fan page, Jake Whitney and Guernica Magazine interviews Moyo, Alan Stevo at LouRockwell.com reviews Moyo's Dead Aid. Africa with Dambisa Moyo link to Uncommon Knowledge interview filmed June 12, 2009, Dambisa Moyo on Twitter, Dambisa Moyo interview May 2010, C-SPAN Q&A interview with Moyo, April 5, 2009, Dambisa Moyo, Is China the New Idol for Emerging Economies? TED Talks.